When we last sat together by this fire, I left a
Farewell,
carriage rolling
Ravenswood.
home through the green
I leave my
country at the
heart
end of a
behind.
summer, and a young woman inside it, carrying two things that should never have to be carried together: a whole season's worth of love and a whole season's worth of dread. You will remember her. You have come this far with her, and I do not think you will have forgotten. Lady Eleanor Beaumont, clever past her own comfort, dowerless, brave in the particular reckless way of a woman who has run out of other things to be. Driving away from Ravenswood Park with the scent of roses still in her clothes. You will remember the orangery and the half-inch of candlelit air that the world did not, in the end, permit to close. You will remember the grave grey Duke of Ravenswood and the brother he had lost in the smoke of Waterloo. Lord Frederick, Freddie, the laughing boy, who had planted no roses but had loved every one, his French mother left behind. And you will remember, because a thing like this is not easily put down, the smiling man at the carriage door, Viscount Harrington, who had hunted Ellie's father into his grave, and who had leaned in close over Ellie's gloved hand and told her pleasantly that he was a patient man, that he would call upon her, mother in the autumn, and that the Duke of Ravenswood, for all his grandeur, was so very reachable. Hold all of that. You will need every piece of it tonight, because the autumn has come now, and the autumn, I promised you, has teeth. London in the autumn of that year was not the London of the spring. The spring season had been all candlelight and hope, a city dressing itself for a dance. The autumn season was a colder thing. The leaves came down gold and brown along the squares, and the great houses lit their lamps an hour earlier each week. And there was a sharpness in the air that got into people, into their words, into their amusements, into the particular pleasure they took in one another's misfortunes. The Tun had had a summer to gather its gossip, and it came back to town with its pockets full. And into this city, in the first cold, brilliant weeks of it, the Duke of Ravenswood did a thing that stopped every drawing-room in Mayfair mid-sentence. He began to court Lady Eleanor Beaumont, openly, in the daylight, before everyone. You must understand how this struck that world to understand the danger of it. The cold Duke, the man who for 4 years had moved through society like a closed door, who attended what he could not avoid and warmed to no one, that man was suddenly, unmistakably, everywhere that Lady Eleanor Beaumont was. He called at the narrow house, in his plain black carriage, and did not seem to care whose curtains twitched. He stood up with her at the assemblies, and not for the discreet 2 dances, but for as many as the night and propriety could be made to allow. He sent no roses. Ellie had taught him, in a shabby parlour, what an unasked-for gift could do to a proud woman, and he had not forgotten the lesson. But he sent her a book of essays with 3 pages marked, because he wished to know whether she would agree with him, and that, to anyone who knew either of them, was a far louder declaration than roses. He had made up his mind, you see. In the orangery he had said it, that he no longer cared to be governed by what was right in the eyes of a world he had heard her twice call a rotten machine. And Alexander of Ravenswood, having made up his mind, did not do things by halves. He had spent 4 years being careful. He had decided to be done with care. Any other young woman in England would have wept for joy. Ellie did not weep for joy. Ellie watched the Duke of Ravenswood walk so openly toward her across the polished floors of Mayfair, and felt her heart rise and her stomach drop in the very same instant, because she alone in all those rooms knew what she was watching. She was watching a brave man walk, in broad and gallant daylight, straight into the open jaws of a trap, and call it, as he came, by the name of love. For Harrington had told her plainly. To turn toward the Duke was to put the Duke in the smiling man's hand. And here was the Duke, turning toward her in front of all of London, with no notion that every step he took in the sunlight was being counted in the dark. She tried in those first weeks to make him stop, I want you to know that. I want it set down clearly, because of what is coming. Ellie did not simply let herself be loved. She met the Duke's open courtship with every gentle discouragement a clever woman could devise. She was cool when she wished to be warm. She spoke of the gulf between them, of her cracked name and his great one, of his grandmother, and she watched it not work, watched him answer her every careful retreat with that grave, steady patience of his, and she understood that she had made him, in the orangery, exactly the wrong promise. She had taught a man who had forgotten how to want anything to want this, and a man like Alexander of Ravenswood, having at last let himself want a thing, was not going to be talked out of it by the very woman he wanted. So the autumn began. The leaves turned, the Duke courted, in the daylight, gallant and doomed. And somewhere behind the gold and falling London afternoon, a patient man unfolded a clean sheet of paper, and dipped his pen, and kept his word. He came on a Tuesday. Ellie was always afterward able to tell you that it was a Tuesday, the way one remembers the small frame around a large bad thing. Viscount Harrington called at the narrow house in the early afternoon, at the correct hour, and he did not ask for Ellie. He asked for the Viscountess. This was new, and it was deliberate. And Ellie, sitting upstairs with the account book, hearing his voice in the hall, that pleasant, unhurried voice, felt the cold thread she carried beneath her, ribs pull so tight that she had to set down her pen. He had not come to court the daughter. He had come openly now to treat with the mother. He had come to do business, and the Viscountess of Beaumont received him gladly. You must not blame her too harshly for that. I have tried, all through this story, not to let you blame her, because she was a frightened woman in failing health watching her family go down. And Viscount Harrington had spent a year and a half being the one bright steady thing on her horizon. He sat with her in the small parlour. He spoke gently of her health, of physicians he could recommend, of the great fatigue of carrying cares as alone. He spoke of his regard for her elder daughter. A regard, he said, that had only deepened, and that he now wished, with her ladyship's permission, to bring to its proper conclusion. He did not say the word debt. He never said the word debt. He spoke instead of futures made safe, of a younger sister who might be brought out as she deserved, of a tired mother who might at last set her burdens down. And he laid all of it before the Viscountess as gently as a man laying a blanket over someone asleep. And the Viscountess wept, and took his hand, and thanked him, and called him the family's deliverance. When he had gone, the Viscountess sent for Ellie, and the scene that followed in that small parlour was, in its quiet way, one of the hardest things Ellie Beaumont had yet been asked to stand inside of. Harder, in truth, than the cruelty that was coming. Because cruelty at least gives you something to push against, and this gave her nothing but love. Her mother held her hands. Her mother's eyes were wet and shining, and, for the first time in 3 years, hopeful, truly hopeful, lit from within. And her mother told her that Viscount Harrington had as good as offered, that he wanted only Ellie's own consent to make it formal, and that, Eleanor, my darling, my clever good girl, it was over. The fear was over. The doctor would be paid, and Margaret would have her chance. And the candles need not be counted any longer. And all of it, the whole rescue of the whole family, hung now on one word from the daughter, who had carried them so long and so well. You have done everything, her mother said, pressing her cold hands. 3 years you have done everything, and never once complained, and I have watched you and been so afraid for you. And now you need only be happy, Ellie. You need only let yourself be saved. And Ellie stood there and looked into her mother's hopeful face and could not. She physically could not speak the truth into it. She could not say, "Mother, the man who wishes to save us is the man who destroyed us." She could not say, "I have heard him skin a frightened old man alive in a library." She could not say, "His kindness is a cage and his patience is a hunt, and I carry, sewn against my heart, a letter in father's own hand that names him for what he is. Her mother was ill. Her mother was holding on to this hope the way a drowning woman holds on to a spar. To take the hope away would be a kind of murder, and Ellie did not have it in her, that afternoon, to do murder. So she said the only thing she could say, which was nothing final and nothing true, and bought herself a little time with it. She said she was sensible of the honour. She said such a step must not be hurried. She said her mother must rest, and not distress herself, and leave it all a while with her. And she went back up the stairs to the account book, and shut the door, and stood in the middle of the cold little room with her hand pressed flat to her chest, and understood, fully now, the shape of the machine that was closing on her. It was a beautiful machine. That was the genius of Harrington, and I want you to see it whole, because Ellie saw it whole that afternoon. He had built it so that every single part of it was love. Her mother's love for her love for her mother, her love for Margaret, 19 and bright, and owed a future. Her love, even, and this was the cruelest gear in the whole engine, her love for Alexander, whom Harrington had promised to ruin if she turned the wrong way. Harrington had arranged matters so that Ellie Beaumont could not save a single person she loved without delivering herself, gift-wrapped, into his hands. To refuse him was not bravery. To refuse him was to choose her own pride over her sick mother's peace, her sister's future, and the safety of the man she loved. He had made her goodness into the bars of her own prison, and he was not finished. A patient man, when he has built such a machine, does not simply switch it on and stand back. He greases its wheels. And the grease that Viscount Harrington chose that autumn was a rumour. It began so quietly that for a week or more, Ellie did not know it had begun at all. That is how the best of these things are done. A reputation in that world was not knifed in the open. It was let down a slow inch at a time, in the dark, by many small hands, and the woman it belonged to was always the last to be told. The first Ellie knew of it was a coldness. She went to a morning concert with Charlotte and a lady she had known for years. Not a friend, but a known nodding acquaintance, looked through her, simply looked through her, as though Ellie were a window, and turned to speak to someone else. A small thing, a nothing. Ellie told herself it was a nothing. But Charlotte, beside her, had gone very still, and Charlotte, walking home, did not pretend it was a nothing, because Charlotte never pretended. "It has started," Charlotte said. "I had hoped I was wrong. I am not wrong. Ellie. There is a thing being said about you, and it is being said cleverly, and I have spent 3 days running it to its source, and the source is smoke, the way it always is with him." She stopped, on the pavement, and made Ellie stop with her. "They are saying that you are no better than you should be. You may not tonight feel the full weight of that phrase the way Ellie felt it. It was a soft phrase. It sounds almost like nothing. But in the mouth of that world it was a blade, because it was unanswerable. It accused a woman of everything, and nothing at once. It could not be disproved. And once it had been said of you, it clung, no better than she should be. It meant, this is a young woman who has been alone with men. This is a young woman whose conduct will not bear looking at. This is not a woman a careful family receives, or a careful son marries, or a careful matron seats near her daughters. And the cleverness of it, the thing that made Ellie sit down, when she got home, rather quickly, was that it was hung upon true facts. That was Harrington's whole art. You have watched him practice it all through this story. He never lied. He simply arranged the truth in a poisoned order. Lady Eleanor Beaumont had been found alone with the Duke of Ravenswood in the dark of a garden last spring. That was true. She had been seen alone with him again, screened by hedges at the Thornbury party. True. She had spent a summer under his roof. And there were always those, who could be brought to remember that she had been found, late, in the orangery, very near to him, in the candlelight. Also true. Set those true things down end to end, in the right tone, in the right ears, and you did not need to tell a single lie. The facts did the work. The dowerless Beaumont girl, the whisper went, had been throwing herself at the Duke of Ravenswood for half a year, in gardens and glass houses, and a girl who would do that, well, a girl who would do that was no better than she should be. Harrington did not start it himself. Of course he did not. Ellie never once caught him at it. And neither did Charlotte, though Charlotte hunted him for a fortnight. He had only, here and there, in the right rooms, with the gravest and most reluctant show of concern for the poor young woman, helped a thing along that he was so sorry, so very sorry, to hear was being said. And it worked, the way it was built to work. The invitations to the narrow house grew fewer. At the assemblies, Ellie felt the room rearrange itself around her, felt herself become a thing the matrons steered their daughters past with a smile, felt the particular loneliness of being looked at by everyone and spoken to by almost no one. It reached Margaret too, and that was the part that twisted hardest in Ellie, because Margaret was 19 and innocent of all of it, and had done nothing but be Ellie's sister, and Ellie watched the bright girl's own little circle thin, watched her not be asked to dance, watched her come home from a rout pink and bewildered and trying not to cry. And Ellie understood that Harrington's machine was eating her sister too. There were exactly 3 people who did not bend. Charlotte Langley stood at Ellie's side at every assembly with her chin up and her dark eyes daring the whole room, and lost, I have no doubt, a number of her own invitations for it, and never once mentioned the cost. The Dowager Duchess of Ravenswood, and this was a public act and a deliberate one, and the ton felt it like a slap. The Dowager Duchess, the most formidable old woman in England, made a point, at the largest assembly of that month, of crossing the entire floor on her ebony cane, to take Lady Eleanor Beaumont's arm and walk her, slowly and visibly, the length of the room, talking pleasantly, whole way, daring any soul present to imagine that the House of Ravenswood saw anything at all amiss. It bought Ellie a fortnight of grace. It could not buy her more. Even a duchess cannot, by herself, turn a tide. But Ellie never forgot that she had done it. And the third was the Duke. The Duke of Ravenswood heard the whisper. A man cannot help but hear it, when it concerns the woman he is openly courting. And his answer to it was simply to court her harder, more openly, more gravely, in plainer sight, as if to say to the whole sneering town, "Here is where I stand, and I should be glad to hear any of you say to my face what you are saying behind your fans." Ellie should have been comforted by it. Instead, it frightened her past sleeping, because she could feel, now, the second blade coming. Harrington had unsheeted the rumour against her, and a man as careful as Harrington does not strike at the woman without also preparing his strike at the man beside her. And sure enough, within the fortnight, Ellie began to hear it. A second whisper, moving alongside the first, darker, uglier, and aimed not at her at all. They were beginning to say things about the Duke of Ravenswood and the war. They were beginning to say that the hero of the dispatches had not been a hero, that on the field at Waterloo there had been a brother, young Lord Frederick, you will recall, that the family did not speak of, and that the grave Duke had come home from that field alive, and decorated while his own brother had not come home at all, and that a man might just quietly ask, what kind of soldier saves himself and loses his own blood? And under that, barely under it, like a stain coming through cloth, something worse, that the missing Lord Frederick's fate was perhaps not a grief the family suffered, but a secret the family kept, that there were reasons the name was not spoken, that the House of Ravenswood, for all its grandeur, had something at its heart that would not bear the daylight. The town did not yet have the word, but Ellie, lying awake in the cold, with her father's letter against her heart, and the Duke's grave, doomed face behind her eyes, knew that the town was being walked, gently, patiently, one whisper at a time, toward a word. And the word was treason. He came to her with the letters on a wet grey evening, and he came, this time, not as a duke and not as a suitor. He came as a man at the end of his own strength, and Ellie saw it the moment she entered the parlour. Because she had learned, over a summer, to read the small country of his face. "I have no right to bring you this," the Duke of Ravenswood said. He had not sat down. He stood by the small fire with his hat still in his hand, and the rain was on the shoulders of his black coat. "Every grain of sense I possess has told me, the whole way here, to turn the carriage round. You are already paying too dear a price for standing near me. To bring you further in is—" He stopped, and his jaw worked, and the long scar caught firelight. "But there is no one else. That is the plain truth of it, Eleanor, and I find I am too tired and too frightened to dress it up for you. There is no one else in the world I can carry this to. Will you look at something?" And he drew from inside his coat a packet of papers, folded small, soft at the creases from much handling, and he held them out to her, and his hand, the hand of a man who had been steady under cannon, was not entirely steady now. Ellie took them to the candle and unfolded them, and for a moment she did not understand what she was looking at. And then she did, and her breath went shallow. There were 3 letters. They were written in French, that she saw at once, the shape of the language unmistakable to a woman who had spent 1,000 secret midnights inside it. But they were not letters anyone could simply read. The French was broken. It ran in a way no living person spoke or wrote, words sitting beside words that had no business beside them. And threaded all through it were numbers, small clusters of figures set between the words, like stones set in a wall. It was, Ellie understood, looking at it, a thing built to be unreadable. It was a cipher. "They came to me over the last 8 months, the Duke said, low, watching her face and not the fire. "The first reached me in the spring, before ever I met you. One in the summer. This last not 3 weeks ago. They come by no hand I can trace. Left, the most of them, where a servant would find them, with nothing to say who sent them or how they knew where to send. I have shown them to no living soul. I have carried them, and I have not slept for them, because, Eleanor, look at me, because I cannot read them, and I am afraid past reason of what they say, and I am more afraid still of what it would mean if I am right about who has sent them." Ellie looked up from the broken French. "Who do you believe has sent them?" The Duke of Ravenswood was a long moment answering. When he did, his voice had gone very quiet and very careful, the voice of a man lifting something he is afraid to drop. "There is a hand at the top of the 3rd sheet," he said. "Look, there, that mark before the writing begins. It is not a letter. It is a small drawing, done quick, the way a man does a thing from old habit without thinking. It is a rose." He drew breath. "When my brother Frederick was a boy, he could not sign a paper, could not finish a note to me from one room of the house to another, without drawing a little rose beside his name. Our mother's mark. He had it off her. She was French, Eleanor. I do not think I have told you that, this summer, among everything else I told you. She came of an old family in France, and she brought her roses to Ravenswood and her language to her sons, and a great deal else besides, and she drew a rose at the foot of every letter of her life, and Freddie thought the sun rose out of her, and Freddie drew it too. The parlour was very still. The rain ran on the glass. "My brother is dead," said the Duke of Ravenswood, and the word came out of him like something torn. "He has been dead these months at Waterloo. The army has as good as told me so. The whole world has buried him. My grandmother has grieved him into her own grave's edge. And then a letter comes to me out of nowhere in a French I cannot read, with my dead mother's rose drawn at the head of it, and Eleanor, I do not know if I am being sent the truth or being played upon by some creature who has learned exactly where to press to bring me. I cannot tell. I have not been able to tell for 8 months, and it is killing me by inches. And I have no one. His voice cracked, clean across, and he did not try to mend it. I have no one to bring it to but you. And Ellie Beaumont stood in the grime candlelight with the broken French in her hands, and the whole shape of it came to her at once. It is not only a cipher, she said slowly. Alexander, look, these numbers, here and here, in their little clusters. A cipher of this kind is not made of nothing. It is made against a book. The numbers count something, a page, a line, a word along the line, and unless you hold the very same book, the same edition, the same printing, the numbers are stones and nothing more. It is the surest cipher in the world and the simplest, and it has just one weakness, which is that both people must own the book and must agree, without ever writing it down, which book it is to be. She lifted her eyes to his. If these letters are truly from your brother, if Freddie made this cipher, then he made it against a book he was certain you would have, and certain you would think of, and certain no other soul on earth would think of, a book that means something only to the two of you. Alexander, what was the book? She watched the Duke of Ravenswood go absolutely white. Our mother's Ronsard, he whispered. Eleanor, dear God. Our mother's Ronsard. I must tell you about the book, because the book is the heart of this, and the heart of why this whole long story carries the name it carries. The late Duchess of Ravenswood, Alexander's French mother, dead these dozen years, had owned and loved past all her other books a small worn volume of the poetry of Pierre de Ronsard. Ronsard, you may not know, was a poet of France from centuries before. And the most famous poem in all that little volume, the one the late Duchess had loved best of anything in any language, was as a poem about a rose. It is a small and very old and very perfect poem. It speaks of going out in the morning to look at a rose newly opened to the sun, and going back at evening to find that same rose already fallen, already scattered, gone in the single turning of one day, and it asks the listener, gently, while there is still time, to gather the roses of life before the evening comes for them too. That was the poem the late Duchess of Ravenswood had read aloud to her two boys, in French, in the long ago, in a house full of her roses. That was the poem Freddie had loved, because she loved it. And that, Ellie understood now, her heart going hard and fast. That was the book against which Lord Frederick of Ravenswood had built his secret cipher. His dead mother's volume of Ronsard, The Rose, poem at the centre of it, a thing his elder brother would keep until he died, and would think of in an instant, and that not one stranger in 10,000 could ever guess. The Duke sent a man riding through the wet night to Ravenswood for the book. It took 2 days. They were the two longest days, Ellie said afterward, that she had passed in the whole of that long autumn. The letters locked in the parlour desk, the rumours thickening in the streets outside, and she and the Duke able to do nothing but wait. But on the third evening the book came, small and worn and smelling of a dead woman's library, and Ellie Beaumont sat down at the parlour table with her father's daughter's whole patient mind, with the gift the world had told her all her life, was an unmarriageable eccentricity, a clever woman's useless trick, and she set the rose poem of Ronsard open beside the broken French, and she began to count. It took her the better part of the night. The Duke did not leave. Propriety be hanged. He sat across the small table through every hour of it, and Charlotte came and sat with them, so that propriety might at least be able to say it had been in the room, and the candle burned down and was replaced, and the rain stopped, and slowly, line by counted line, word by recovered word, the cipher gave up its dead. And what the letters said, when Ellie had drawn them whole at last out of the numbers, was this: Lord Frederick of Ravenswood was alive. He had not died at Waterloo. He had been most grievously wounded there, left for dead in truth, among the true dead, in the smoke and the wreck of that terrible evening. And he had been found, in the dark, not by his own army, but by others. And in the long, blurred fever months of his mending, in a country not his own, Lord Frederick of Ravenswood had been drawn into a war that did not end when the cannon stopped. For the cannon stopping, Ellie read, had not stopped everything. Napoleon was beaten and caged on his far rock in the Southern Ocean. But the cause of him was not dead, and there were yet, in England as much as in France, men who worked quietly for it, who passed money and messages and names, who plotted in low rooms for the day the emperor might come again, or his son might rise, who were, in the plain word of it, the enemy, still, in peacetime, in evening, dress at the next table. And the catching of such men was its own secret service, and that secret service, learning that there breathed somewhere a wounded English lord with a French mother and a Frenchman's flawless tongue and a dead man's perfect freedom to go where he pleased. That service had found Lord Frederick of Ravenswood, the single most useful ghost in Europe. So Freddie had let himself stay dead. He had let his own brother grieve him, and his own grandmother, because his deadness was his armour and his weapon both. A dead man can walk into rooms a living lord never could. And because the work was real, and the men he hunted were real, and a soldier does not lay down a real war merely because he is tired and his family weeps. He had stayed dead, and he had gone in among the French sympathizers as one of their own, an embittered half-French aristocrat with a grievance. And he had been, these months, quietly taking that network apart from the inside. That was the truth in the letters. And had that been all of it? Ellie thought, sitting back at last from the table as the grey came up in the window, her hand cramped, her eyes burning, the Duke of Ravenswood opposite her with his face in his hands and his dead brother alive in the pages between them. Had that been all of it, it would have been a hard and a wonderful thing, a brother lost and found, a grief turned inside out, into a fierce secret pride. But it was not all of it, and the rest of it was the reason Freddie had broken 8 months of silence to write at all. Freddie wrote, and Ellie's voice, reading this part aloud to the Duke in the grey dawn light, had gone almost too quiet to hear. Freddie wrote that the network he hunted was not a network of strangers, that at the centre of it, drawing the threads, taking the money, holding the names, was a man Freddie had at first not believed and then had been forced to believe. An English peer, received everywhere, a man of great smiling patience, who had been selling his own country's secrets and shielding his own country's enemies for longer than the late war had run. Freddie did not, in the letters, dare to write the man's full name even in cipher. But he wrote enough. He wrote of a Viscount. He wrote of a man forever in midnight blue. And he wrote. This was the line that made the Duke of Ravenswood lift his ruined face out of his hands. He wrote that this man had lately discovered that Lord Frederick of Ravenswood was not dead after all, and that this man therefore now held, in his own 2 hands, the power to destroy the entire house of Ravenswood whenever it should suit him. For consider it, Freddie wrote, as Ellie read it aloud, and the dawn came up grey and pitiless. Consider how it would look, set down by an enemy's clever pen. A duke's brother, not dead but alive, alive and hidden, and moving these many months among the known agents of France, in their councils, taking their pay, drawing their maps. Strip away the one fact that it was done in England's service, and only a handful of men in the secret offices of the Crown could swear to that fact, and they would swear to nothing in the open, for to own Freddie was to burn Freddie. Strip that away, and what remains? What remains is a French-blooded ducal house with one son, a hidden agent of the enemy, and the other son, the Duke himself, surely aware of it, and saying nothing, and shielding him. What remains, Freddie wrote, is treason, not a rumour of treason, the very thing, enough to attaint the blood and forfeit the title, and bring 400 years of Ravenswood down into the dirt, and to put a rope in the cold end of it, about my own neck and perhaps about yours. The letter, the last letter, the etuist, the one with the small quick rose drawn at its head, ended on a warning and a plea. The man in midnight blue, Freddie wrote, was moving at last. After months of merely holding the knowledge, he had begun to use it. Brother, Freddie wrote, in the French, that Ellie turned last into English in that cold dawn room. Guard yourself. He has found the lever that moves you, and he will pull it, and I cannot come into the open to stand beside you without undoing every safeguard that keeps the work and my own life whole. Trust no smiling man. And if there is any soul near you clever and brave enough to be trusted with this, and pray God there is, for you were never made to carry such a thing alone, then trust them with your whole life, because you are going to need them. Ellie set down the last page. For a long moment, neither she nor the Duke of Ravenswood said anything at all. The fire had died in the grate. Charlotte, in the corner, had silent tears standing on her face, and the Duke looked across the small, scarred table at the dowerless, ruined, sleepless woman who had just, with her useless, unmarriageable gift, handed him back his brother from the dead, and the whole shape of his enemy in the same breath. And Ellie saw, in his grey, exhausted eyes, the thing the letter had asked him to find. He had found it. She was sitting across the table from it, and both of them knew, in that grey hour, that there could now be no more talk, ever, of her standing safely apart from his life. Because she was, already, all the way inside it, holding its deepest secret in her cramped and ink-stained hand. The fourth letter. For there came a fourth, hard upon the heels of Ellie's long night's work, as though Freddie had somehow felt across all that distance that his brother could read him at last. The fourth letter named a place and a night and an hour. It was not safe. Everything in the Duke rebelled against it, and everything in Ellie. And Charlotte said plainly that it had the smell of a trap and that she did not like it. But it was in Freddie's hand, with Freddie's rose, in the cipher only Freddie and now Ellie could work. And a man who has had his brother handed back to him out of the grave is not, in the end, going to be governed by what is safe. The Duke would go, and Ellie, who had decoded the summons, who could read Freddie's hand as no one else living could and might be needed, if anything in the meeting itself were passed in cipher or in code. Ellie said, in a voice that left no room in it for argument, that she would go with him. The Duke argued, of course. He lost. He was, by this stage of the story, becoming accustomed to losing that particular argument, and I think, though he would not have said so, that he had begun to be glad of how reliably he lost it. The place was a churchyard, on the dim eastern edge of the city, where the streets gave way to market gardens and the lamps gave out. The hour was past midnight. They went in the plain black carriage with no crest, and they left it at the end of the lane. And the Duke of Ravenswood and Lady Eleanor Beaumont walked into the dark of an old churchyard together, with their hearts going hard, and waited among the leaning stones in a cold that smelled of frost and turned earth. He came so quietly that they did not hear him. One moment the churchyard was empty. The next, there was a man standing in the black shade of the yew, and a low voice came out of that shade, in English, and the English shook. Alex, I do not think I can give you, in full, what passed in that churchyard. Some moments in a story are too large for the telling. And the meeting of those two brothers, after Waterloo, after the smoke, after 8 months of one believing the other in his grave, that was such a moment, and I will not cheapen it by crowding it with words. Lord Frederick of Ravenswood stepped out of the shade of the yew, and the Duke of Ravenswood looked at him, and for a moment the grave grey master of 400 years of Ravenswood, the man the whole ton thought made of stone, simply could not move at all, and then he crossed the frozen grass and took his living brother into his arms. And the two of them stood among the gravestones, holding one another, and neither of them made a sound. And Ellie turned her face away into the dark, and gave them what little privacy a churchyard at midnight can give. But I will tell you what Freddie looked like, because it matters, and because Ellie never forgot it. She had heard of him all summer as the bright one, the laughing boy, the warm, uncomplicated one, the brother who drew roses. The man who came out from under the yew was not bright. He was perhaps 23, and he looked a hard 10 years more. He was thin in the way of a man who has been ill and gone on past it without resting. There was grey already at the edge of his hair and a stillness in him, a watchfulness that Ellie recognized at once because she had spent a summer learning to read it on his brother's face. The war had not taken Freddie's life, but it had taken the boy who drew roses and sent back in his place a quiet, dangerous man who looked at the dark spaces between things and stood always where his back was to a wall. And Ellie, watching the two brothers, watching the soldier and the duke, understood with a fresh ache exactly what Harrington's long shadow had cost this family, and exactly how much it would yet cost them if it were not stopped. They could not stay long. Freddie said so within minutes. Every minute in the open was a danger, to him, to the work, to them. And so the three of them stood close together in the lee of the old church and spoke low and fast, and Freddie told them what the letters could not. He told them that he had been right about the man in midnight blue, and that he was sorry past saying to be right. Viscount Harrington, and Freddie did, here, in the churchyard, at last say the name, quietly, the way you say the name of an illness. Viscount Harrington was the keystone of the whole rotten arch. He was no mere blackmailer. The blackmail, the patient devouring of men like Sir John Crewe, was only Harrington's smaller trade, the means by which he bought silence and bought tools and bought reach. His true commerce was treason, and had been for years. He had sold the late war's secrets while the war still ran, and now in the peace he sheltered and funded the men who meant to light it again. And Freddie's Secret Service had known for a year that there was such a keystone, and had been a year hunting his name, and it was Freddie, moving as a dead man through the low rooms, who had finally fixed it upon Harrington. Which is why, Freddie said, he has turned to face us. He knows there is a hunter inside his house. He does not yet know it is me. If he knew that, I should not be standing in this churchyard. I should be in the river. But he has learned the one fact that arms him against the whole of us together. He has learned that Frederick of Ravenswood did not die, and a clever traitor who learns that does not run to a magistrate, Alex. He builds a frame around it. He has spent these months gathering every paper, every witness, every true crumb of where I have been and whom I have sat with, so that on the day it serves him, he can lay it all before the crown as the treason of the House of Ravenswood, your treason, for the concealing of it, and stand back, all sorrow and loyalty, and watch us burn. He holds that frame now, finished, in a drawer. It is the lever our mother's poem warned no enemy should ever be allowed to find. And he has found it, and the only question left in the world is what he means to make us pay to keep that drawer shut. I know what he means to make us pay, said the Duke of Ravenswood, very low. And Freddie looked, then, for the first time, full at Ellie, at the dowerless woman standing in a frozen churchyard at 1 in the morning beside his brother. And something moved across his hard, quiet face that was almost, not quite, the ghost of the boy who drew roses. You are the one who read me, he said. 8 months I have been writing into the dark, not knowing if a word of it landed, and my brother who could not crack his own name in a cipher when we were boys. The ghost of a smile, gone at once. My brother found a mind to do it. Our mother's book, our mother's rose. He inclined his head to her, a small, grave, courtly motion, absurd and perfect in that place. I do not know your name, madam, and it is safer that I do not. But I know what you have done. You have given me back my brother as surely as he has given me back to you. Whatever he is to you, And I find I do not need to be told, hold on to him. He was always going to need someone braver than himself. He stepped back toward the dark of the yew. Watch the smiling man. Trust the offices of the crown to move slowly, because they always do. And the proof against Harrington to come too late, because it always does. And, Alex. The brothers' eyes met and held across the cold grass. Do not, whatever the cost, whatever he threatens, do not let him make you sell your own happiness to keep my secret. I did not stay alive in the smoke to be the reason you died in the daylight. Promise me nothing. You always were a poor liar. Only, remember it. And then Lord Frederick of Ravenswood stepped back into the black shade of the yew, and the shade was empty, and he was gone as quietly as he had come, back into his life as a dead man. And Ellie and the Duke stood alone among the leaning stones with the frost coming down, holding, now, between the two of them, the most dangerous truth in England. The blow fell, as the worst blows in that world always fell, in the middle of a dance. Lord and Lady Marchmont gave the great ball of that autumn. And all the world went, because all the world always went, and Ellie went because to stay away would have been to confess that the whispers had found their mark. She went on the Duke's arm, in fact. He had asked, publicly, and she had not been able, in front of her hopeful mother and her frightened sister, to refuse him, and she went knowing, with the cold certainty that never left her now, that a room that full and that watchful was exactly the ground Harrington would choose. She had begged Alexander, in the carriage, to be careful. He had said, in the carriage, that he was tired of being careful. They were, neither of them, wrong. It came between the second dance and the third, in that hush when the music has stopped and the floor is clearing, and a great room is for a moment quiet enough to carry a voice. The voice belonged to a young man named Danforth, a flushed, loud, unremarkable young man, and Ellie knew him for what he was the instant he began. Because she had learned Harrington's methods in a hard school, Danforth was a tool, a young man deep in debt to the wrong people, doing, too loudly, a thing he had been promised would clear it. He stood in a knot of guests, near the foot of the room, with the Duke of Ravenswood well within the carry of his voice, and he asked his question of the company at large, in the carrying tone of a man who wants to be overheard. He asked whether it was not a curious thing. He had been wondering, he said. He meant no harm by it. Whether it was not a curious thing that the Duke of Ravenswood was so very honoured for Waterloo, when the plain fact, the fact nobody seemed to wish to look at, was that his Grace had come home from that field, with his medals and his scar and his great name. And his own young brother had not come home at all. A man might wonder, Danforth said, into the spreading silence. What manner of officer, what manner of brother, saves his own skin and loses his blood's? And you could hear, Ellie said, the exact moment the rehearsed part began. Danforth lowered his voice to the particular pitch that is meant to be heard by everyone, and added that of course one did not like to say it, but there were those who held that the truth of young Lord Frederick's fate was not a thing the family grieved, but a thing the family hid, and that a house with French blood in it, in times such as these, with a vanished son nobody could account for, was perhaps not a house whose loyalty a careful person should take entirely on trust. There it was, said, in the open, in the Marchmont's great gold ballroom, before 400 people. The word treason was not spoken. Harrington's craft held even here, even through his tool. But it stood in the room as plainly as if it had been, and the great bright crowd went terribly, attentively, hungrily silent, and 400 faces turned, slowly, to the Duke of Ravenswood. And the Duke of Ravenswood could not answer. I want you to feel the whole cruelty of this, because it was the cruelest single moment the story had yet built. And Harrington had built it with the patience of a man laying a stone wall. The accusation was a lie, every word of it a lie, and the truth that would have shattered it was sitting, complete and perfect, behind the Duke's locked teeth. Freddie lived. Freddie was a hero. Freddie was at that very hour risking his life in his country's most secret service. One sentence of that truth, spoken aloud in the Marchmont ballroom, would have turned the whole room from the Duke's accusers into his ashamed admirers in the space of a breath. And it was the one sentence in all the world the Duke of Ravenswood could not say, because to say it was to burn his brother alive, to undo the work, to hand Harrington in public the very treason frame he had built in private. The truth would save Alexander and kill Freddie. So the Duke of Ravenswood stood in the centre of that pitiless gold room and held his brother's life behind his teeth and said nothing, and 400 people watched a proud man stand silent under an accusation of cowardice and read his silence exactly as Harrington had known they would, as the confession of a guilty man. Ellie felt the room deciding. That is the thing about the ton that she had learned to dread above all its other cruelties. The speed of it, the way a great crowd could turn, all together, like a flock of birds, and once turned, would not turn back. She felt them deciding against him. She saw, at the edge of the knot of guests, Viscount Harrington, who had not said one word, who would never need to say one word, watching the Duke of Ravenswood drown, with an expression of the gravest and most courteous concern. And she felt Charlotte's hand close hard around her wrist. A warning, a plea. Charlotte had seen Ellie's face, and Charlotte knew, the way only a friend of 20 years knows, exactly what Ellie was about to do, and what it would cost. And Charlotte's grip said, as plainly as a grip can say anything, "Do not. You are already half ruined. This will finish it. This will finish you and your mother and Margaret, and you cannot undo it, and you cannot save him anyway. Do not." Ellie looked once at the Duke of Ravenswood, standing alone in the middle of the floor, and then Lady Eleanor Beaumont gently took her wrist out of her dearest friend's hand and stepped forward, out of the safe anonymous crowd, into the open and terrible centre of the room, and spoke, and her voice, to her own great surprise, did not shake at all. "You wonder aloud, Mr. Danforth," she said, "and you are at such pains to be overheard wondering it, that I think the whole room may as well wonder along with you. So let us all wonder together, but let us wonder honestly, which I notice you have not." The silence changed its quality. 400 faces swung from the Duke to her. "You have asked us to look at a brave man," Ellie said, "and see a coward on no evidence at all but that he is alive and his brother is not. By that arithmetic, sir, every soldier who survived that war is a coward, and every grieving family in England keeps a guilty secret, and there is not a house in this room that your wondering could not blacken. That is not a question. It is a slander wearing a question's clothes, and I notice it is wearing them, as slander always does, on a borrowed back. You did not invent this, Mr. Danforth. You have not the wit, and I mean you no unkindness by saying so. It is rather to your credit. You are repeating it, and I find I am very curious indeed about the gentleman who taught it to you. The gentleman who is always, somehow, 3 steps from these whispers, and always, somehow, only sorrowfully passing them along, and who has been, I have noticed, so very busy and so very obliging this whole autumn. She did not look at Harrington. She did not have to. She felt the sharper half of the room follow the shape of the thing she had not said, and find him with their eyes. And she let the silence do that work. And then she went on. "I will tell you what I know, since this room is so hungry to be told things. I know the Duke of Ravenswood. I have been a guest beneath his roof. I have watched him with his servants, and his tenants, and his grandmother, and his friends, when he had no notion he was watched, which is the only honest hour for the watching of any man. And I will stand here, in front of every one of you, and stake my word upon it. That man's silence tonight is not the silence of guilt. It is the silence of a man under an accusation he is too honourable to answer in the coin it was offered in. You have mistaken his dignity for a confession. You have done it because a clever and a cowardly person, somewhere behind young Mr. Danforth here, has spent this whole autumn teaching you to. She drew a breath. And here, listeners, here is the part that Charlotte had gripped her wrist to prevent. The part Ellie did with her eyes wide open, knowing the whole price of it. And I am aware, said Lady Eleanor Beaumont, clear and steady into the great gold silent room, of precisely what it costs a woman in my position to stand here and say this. I am aware of what this room has lately been pleased to whisper about me. I have heard it. No better than I should be. I believe that is the phrase. It has been said cleverly enough that it has reached even the person it was built to wound. So you need not trouble to whisper it any longer behind your fans. I will say it for you, plainly, in the open, and be done. I know that by stepping out of that crowd and into this floor to defend this man, I have, in the eyes of every careful matron present, confirmed it. I know I have spent my own good name tonight in front of all of you, and that I shall not get it back. I want you to understand that I knew that, and counted it, and stepped forward anyway, because a reputation, it turns out, is a small thing to set against the truth. And I would very much rather leave this room ruined and honest than stay safe in that crowd and silent while a brave man is devoured for the entertainment of cowards. Good evening. And Lady Eleanor Beaumont turned in the ringing silence and walked back toward the edge of the room with her chin up, ruined and magnificent, and entirely alone on that long stretch of floor. She had not, you understand, won. I must be honest with you, as I have promised all along to be. A single brave speech does not undo an autumn's patient poison, and the tun did not in that moment fall to its knees and beg the Duke's pardon. But she had done the one thing Harrington's whole craft could not survive, and that was to make the room doubt. She had named the method. She had pointed, without pointing, at the hand. She had broken the smooth and certain surface of the slander. And once a thing like that is cracked, it can never be made perfectly smooth again. And 400 people who had walked into that ballroom certain walked out of it, wondering, and wondering, in that world, was the beginning of the end of a lie. But that is not what Ellie remembered of that night. What Ellie remembered of that night, what she carried to the end of her life, was the Duke of Ravenswood's face. He had not moved through the whole of her speech. He had stood in the centre of the floor where the accusation had pinned him, and he had watched her. Watched a dowerless, half-ruined woman set fire to the last of her own future, in public, with 400 witnesses, for no reason on this earth but that he was being wronged, and she would not bear it. And Ellie, walking back across that long floor, made herself look at him once. And what she saw in his grey eyes was not gratitude, and it was not even love as she had seen it in the orangery, the warm and guarded summer thing. What she saw in the Duke of Ravenswood's face, in the wreck of the Marchmont ball, was a man who had just, finally, completely, with nothing left in him, held back, or packed away, or kept safe, understood. He had spent the whole story believing he must be careful of what he let himself want. And he had just watched the thing he wanted defend him with her own destruction, using nothing but her courage and her clear, unbearable mind. And he understood, at last, that what he felt for Lady Eleanor Beaumont had never had the first thing to do with duty, or with a duke's need of a duchess, or with the warm, safe pull of the orangery. He loved her for the way her mind worked. He loved her for the thing she had just done. He loved her, and he was going to tell her so tonight, in plain words, with every wall in him down. And he did not yet know, as he started across the floor toward her, that he had perhaps 4 hours left in which telling her so would do anything but break both their hearts. He reached her at the edge of the room, and he did not say a word. He simply offered his arm, gravely, formally, in front of everyone, which, after what had just passed, was its own loud answer to the whole staring ballroom. And Ellie, past being prudent now, past caring, took it. And the Duke of Ravenswood walked her out of the heat and the noise, and the 400 Terfengaces down a quiet, panelled passage into a small, dim alcove off the Marchmonts' long gallery, where a single branch of candles burned, and a tall window gave onto the cold autumn dark, and the music of the ball came through the wall faint and far away, like something remembered. And there at last, with no door for Margaret to bang open, and no servants over the brass, and no enemy at the carriage step, there at last, in a quiet alcove, with the whole disastrous, brilliant world shut out behind a wall, the Duke of Ravenswood and Lady Eleanor Beaumont stood and faced each other with nothing whatever left between them. "You should not have done it," he said. His voice was low and not quite even. "You have spent everything, your name, your standing, your mother's hopes, everything you have carried and protected for 3 years. You have spent it all, tonight, in 10 minutes, on me. You should not have done it, Eleanor." "I know," Ellie said. "Why did you?" And Ellie Beaumont looked up at the grave, scarred face of the man she loved, and found that she was as tired of being careful as he had ever been. And so she gave him, in that alcove, the plain truth, with no wall left around it. "Because I love you," she said. "There, I have said it, and I find I am not even frightened to have said it, which after 3 years of being frightened of everything is a very great relief. I love you, Alexander. I have loved you, I think, since a dark garden and a glass of lemonade, when I did not know what you were, and you let me be rude to you, and I felt, for the first time in a year, like a person, and not a problem. I love you, and I could no more have stood in that crowd and watched them tear you apart than I could have stood and watched it done to my own sister. It was not a brave thing I did tonight. Everyone will call it a reckless thing and a ruinous thing, and they will be right. But it was not, in here." She touched her own breast lightly, where the letter was. "It was not even a choice." The Duke of Ravenswood was silent for a moment, and then he did a thing Ellie had never seen him do, in a garden or a library or an orangery or anywhere in the whole long story of them. He reached up, slowly, and he set both his hands, very gently, against the sides of her face, as a man holds something he has decided. He is no longer going to pretend he does not treasure. "Then hear me," he said, "because I have something to say to you that I have been 4 years unlearning how to say, and I mean to say all of it, and say it properly, and not have it interrupted by a door. When my grandmother first dragged me to a ballroom this spring, I went to find a duchess. I want you to know that, because I want you to know how completely you have undone it. I meant to choose a wife the way careful man chooses anything, for her suitability, her quietness, the smoothness she would lend to a life I had arranged to be as smooth and as cold and as safe as a frozen pond. I had decided I was not a man who could be allowed to love anything, because everything I had loved, the war had taught me, could be taken between one breath and the next. And then a woman ran into me in the dark and ordered me about, and was not afraid of me, and called me a brooding statue. And I have not had a single safe or frozen day since. And I find, Eleanor, look at me. I find I would not give 1 hour of these unsafe days back for all the frozen years I had before them. I do not love you because you would make a fitting duchess. You would make an appalling duchess. You would tell the truth at dinner and ruin everyone's digestion." Ellie laughed, and it broke a little in the middle, and he went on, his hands still framing her, face his thumbs against the freckles. "I love you for your mind. I have never in my life met its equal, and I have stopped expecting to. I love that you saw, in a packet of broken French that had defeated me for 8 months, a poem and a counting and a way through. I love that you walked into the worst room in England tonight and set yourself on fire to keep me warm. I do not want a duchess, Eleanor. I have a great empty house full of my mother's roses and my own silence, and I do not want it made smooth. I want it made true. I want you in it. Your mind, and your courage, and your dreadful honesty, and your freckles, and the whole of you. Not because you are suitable, but because you are, as far as I have ever been able to discover, the only thing in this entire world that I could not bear to lose and go on. That is not a duke speaking. That is only a man. I love you. I have said it properly now, and there was no door, and I should like, if you have no strong objection, to be allowed at last to. And Ellie Beaumont, who had no strong objection, who had no objection of any kind at all, lifted her face the last half-inch. The half-inch the orangery had been refused, and the Duke of Ravenswood bent his head, and in the quiet candlelit alcove, with the music of a ruinous ball coming faint through the wall, they kissed. I will not crowd this moment either. It was there first, after a garden and a summer and a churchyard full of frost. It was gentle, and it was not brief, and it was the kind of kiss that two people who have been kept apart by walls for a whole story finally fall into like coming home. And when it ended, they did not step apart. They stood close in the small bright alcove with their brows nearly touching, and for one moment, Lady Eleanor Beaumont let herself simply be happy, completely and without arithmetic, for the first time since a card table had broken her family 3 years before. One moment. The story allowed her that. It is, I am sorry to tell you, the last unmixed moment of happiness this part of the tale has to give her, because the world had followed them down the panelled passage. The world always follows, and the world was even then walking toward the alcove door. The world's footsteps belonged to a footman, and the footman carried a note, and the note was for the Duke, and it was unsigned. But Alexander read the 3 lines of it and went very still, and Ellie, watching his face close like a door, knew before he spoke that the alcove and the candlelight and the one unmixed moment were over. He wishes to see me, the Duke said quietly, now, in Lord Marchmont's library. He has chosen his ground well. A public house, a private room, and the certainty that I will come, because he has written one line that he knows will fetch me. He looked up, and his grey eyes were bleak. The line is, I think we should speak of your brother's roses. He did not want her to come. Of course he did not. But Ellie had stopped. Some hours and one churchyard ago. Being a woman, the Duke of Ravenswood could leave on the safe side of a door. And she said so, and he yielded, because the truth was that he no longer wanted to face anything without her either. And so the two of them walked together to Lord Marchmont's library, and went in, and found Viscount Harrington standing at his ease by the fire, in his midnight blue, smiling. Your Grace! He bowed. He included Ellie in it, gracefully. Lady Eleanor, how very fitting that you are here too. Indeed, I had hoped you would be. It spares me the tedium of saying everything twice. And after your really remarkable performance in the ballroom this evening, Lady Eleanor, it would be idle of any of us to go on pretending. You are not at the very centre of this. You have a rare mind. I have always said so. I find I admire it most of all now, when it is about to be of such use to me. Say what you have brought us here to say, Harrington, said the Duke, willingly. Harrington's smile did not move. I am, as Lady Eleanor has had occasion to learn, a man who values plainness among friends. So, plainly, I know that your brother, Lord Frederick, did not die at Waterloo. I have known it for the better part of a year. I know, not in every particular, but in enough, where he has been since, and in whose company, and at what work. And I have spent that year, your Grace, doing what a careful man does with such knowledge. I have written it down. I have gathered the papers and the witnesses and the dates, and I have built of them a thing, a true thing. Mark you, that is the beauty of it. Very nearly every fact in it is perfectly true. A thing which, laid before the proper persons of the Crown, would see Lord Frederick of Ravenswood hanged for a traitor, and would see you, your grace, attainted beside him for the concealing of it, and would see 400 years of your house struck off the rolls, and your title forfeit, and your grandmother carried to her grave in the full public knowledge of it. It is all in a drawer. It is finished. It wants only my decision to use it. The fire ticked. Ellie's hand had found the Duke's, and neither of them had been aware of it. "And your price," said the Duke of Ravenswood, "for the drawer staying shut." "Ah." And here, for one moment, the smile did leave Viscount Harrington's face, and Ellie saw underneath it the flat, a patient nothing that she had heard once in a library at Ravenswood, and would never forget. "My price is small, your grace. My price is so small it is almost an insult to a man of your fortune. My price is simply that everything stops. You will cease, from tonight, your courtship of Lady Eleanor Beaumont, wholly, publicly. Finally, you will not see her, nor write to her, nor speak her name. And Lady Eleanor," he turned the flat, pale eyes on her, "will do me the honour of accepting the offer of marriage which her mother has, I am glad to say, already received with such good sense. You will marry me, Lady Eleanor, before Christmas, quietly, and in exchange the drawer stays shut. Your Duke's brother goes on breathing, your Duke's house goes on standing, and your own family, your mother's health, your sister's prospects, that whole long, anxious account you have kept so bravely for 3 years, is settled and safe and forgotten. That is all. A marriage. People make them every day for far less excellent reasons." The smile came back. "I did tell you, Lady Eleanor, at a carriage door this summer, that I was a patient man, and that my patience had acquired a rival in my regard for you. You see that I spoke nothing but the truth. I have always spoken you nothing but the truth. It is the cruelest thing I could possibly have done to you, and you are clever enough, I think, to appreciate it." He bowed to them both then, and he told them, pleasantly, that he would not insult their intelligence by demanding an answer in the heat of the moment, that he was, as ever, content to wait, that he would call upon the Viscountess within the week, and trusted he would by then be received as a son. And he left the library, and shut the door softly behind him, and left the Duke of Ravenswood and Lady Eleanor Beaumont alone with the price of the truth. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The dreadful arithmetic was doing itself, in each of them, in the silence, and it came out, for each of them, to the same pitiless sum. And that, listeners, is the tragedy I have been walking you toward all this long evening, and I will not soften it, because it was not soft. Ellie sought it first, or said it first. "It is over," she said, and her voice was terribly quiet and terribly steady. "Do you see it, Alexander? It is over, and there is no clever way through it, and I have looked. If we defy him, he opens the drawer. If he opens the drawer, Freddie hangs, and you are attainted, and your grandmother dies in disgrace, and your house is destroyed, and my family is ruined along with us. For I will be the woman who chooses it. Every single person that either of us loves is inside his drawer, and the key to the drawer is one wedding ring. He has not even asked a hard thing. He has asked the easiest thing in the world, the thing 100 women do every season. He has only asked me to marry a rich man instead of a poor one, and against that he has set the lives of everyone we love." She drew a breath, and it shook, finally, at last, the steadiness going. "I have to marry him. You know that I have to marry him. There is no version of this. There's no version anywhere in which I do not." "There is," said the Duke of Ravenswood. "There is one." And Ellie heard in his voice that he had done the same arithmetic and reached a different room of the same dark house, and her heart began to break before he had even said it. "I will not let you," he said. "Hear me. I will not stand by while you sell your one life to that man to keep my brother and my house and my name out of his drawer. It is not yours to pay, Eleanor. It was never yours to pay. And I find that I would rather—" His voice was not steady now either. The war had taught him to be steady through almost anything, and it had not taught him this. I would rather lose the title, and the house, and 400 years, and stand in the dock myself, than buy any of it with you. So you will not marry him to save me. I forbid it. I have no right to forbid you anything, and I forbid it anyway. But Eleanor, and this is the thing I have seen, and it is the thing that I think ends us. Even if you do not marry him to save me, you must still be free of me. Do you understand? Whatever is decided about Harrington's drawer, whatever Freddie's people in their slow, secret offices can or cannot do, the plain truth is this. I am a man with a brother the law could hang, a house that could be struck down, and an enemy who has built a frame around all of it and waits only for the day to use it. My life is a house with the foundations dug out from under it. It may stand. It may any morning come down. And I have spent this whole story telling myself I had no right to ask a woman to come and live in such a house. And tonight, watching you burn your own future in that ballroom, I finally believe it. You have given everything for this family already, Eleanor. Your father's debts, your mother's care, 3 years of your one young life, and tonight your very name. I will not also let you give your future to the wreck of mine. You deserve, God, you deserve so far better than a damaged man and a doomed house, and a life lived waiting for a drawer to open. You deserve to be free of all of it. Free of Harrington and free of me. And there it was, listeners. There was the cruelty whole. Do you see what Harrington had done? Do you see the full and terrible cleverness of it? He had not needed to part them by making them stop loving each other. He was far too fine a craftsman for anything so crude. He had parted them by their love. He had built a trap in which the most loving thing Ellie could do was to marry him and save them all. And the most loving thing Alexander could do was to let her go, so that she need not. Each of them, standing in that library, was trying with the whole of their heart to protect the other. And the protecting drove them apart, as surely as hatred ever could have. And neither of them was wrong, and that is the worst kind of grief there is. The kind where no one has done anything but love, and everyone is ruined by it anyway. They did not have a great scene of it. I think you may have expected one, and I find I cannot give it to you, because they did not have one. There was nothing left to argue. The arithmetic had been done, and 2 clever people do not rage against a sum they have both already checked. They stood in Lord Marchmont's library, a yard apart, and could not close the yard, because closing it would only make the parting cost more, and it was going to cost enough. Then we are agreed, Ellie said at last, that we are each determined to save the other, and that we cannot both have our way, and that we will most likely spend the rest of our lives furious with each other for it. A sound came out of her that was trying to be a laugh, and did not nearly manage. We met in a garden, you and I, 2 strangers being miserable in private. Do you remember? You said it made a confessional of almost anywhere. I think I would like that to be the thing I keep. Not this room, the garden. Will you let me keep the garden, Alexander? And not this. Eleanor, please do not say my name like that again, she said very gently, or I shall not be able to walk out of this room, and I have to walk out of this room. My mother is waiting up. She is so happy, you see. She thinks she has been saved. And the steadiness broke fully. Then, at last, just for a moment, just for the length of one breath. And then Lady Eleanor Beaumont gathered it back up, the way she had gathered everything back up for 3 years, because that is what is done. And she made him the smallest curtsy, and she said, "Goodbye, Your Grace." And she walked out of Lord Marchmont's library and did not let herself look back, because she knew, with the cold, sure knowledge that had never once failed her, that if she looked back she was lost. The Duke of Ravenswood stood alone in the library for a long time after the door had closed. The fire burned down, and somewhere out in the cold autumn night, a clever, brave, breaking woman was being handed up into a carriage to go home to a mother who thought the family saved, carrying still, sewn against her heart, an unfinished letter in her dead father's hand, the letter that had begun this whole long tale, the letter that said the hunt was patient and long and not, even now, concluded. It was not concluded. Harrington thought he had won, and that, my dear listeners, the certainty of a patient man who believes the board is finally his. That is so very often the beginning of the end of him. And there, by the dying fire, the third part of our tale must rest, with two people who love each other entirely, parted by that very love into separate silences, with a wedding to a smiling man, set down on the calendar before Christmas, and with the cold coming on. In the part to come, the last turning of this long road, and I will not pretend to you it is a gentle one. The winter closes over London, and the winter, you will find, settles all accounts. Eleanor Beaumont will go toward her wedding, like a woman walking out onto a frozen lake, listening to the ice. But she is not, whatever Harrington believes, a woman who has surrendered, and a clever woman with a letter sewn against her heart, a dead poet's cipher in her head, and a brother in the dark who owes her his life, is a far more dangerous thing than a patient man has reckoned for. The slow secret offices of the Crown will begin at last to move. Lord Frederick of Ravenswood will come up out of the dark one final time, and not alone. There will be a snowstorm. There will be a confrontation that the drawing rooms of London will whisper of for 30 years, and a moment upon the snow when the whole long hunt turns all at once upon the hunter. And there will be a question answered that this story has carried unspoken since its very first night. Why? Why a patient man spent years and craft and his own dark soul to destroy one charming, foolish, gambling Viscount Beaumont and every soul who bore his name. The rose, you were promised, would tell you why this tale is named for it. In the part that comes, you will stand at last in a garden under snow, and you will see the whole of it. What grew in the shadow, and whose hand planted the thorns, and what blooms against all the cold when the shadow is finally torn away. Stay close. The fire has burned low, but it is not out, and neither, I promise you, is she. The reckoning is coming, and the reckoning, my dear listeners, has been a very long time owed.